Jakkie Cilliers from the ISS, Institute of Security Studies, is with us. Jakkie, I can't remember how long ago it was, but it couldn't have been more than a couple of years when you wrote your manuscript about the future for South Africa. And in it, you unpacked the likely or the best possible future would be one where we would have coalitions in the political sphere. Well, what we saw in the local elections appears to have been ahead of everybody's anticipation of when coalition politics would hit South Africa. Uh, I'm not sure that anybody has a crystal ball, but certainly, uh, whereas the timing might have been different, you certainly were looking ahead to this as a prospect for the country.
Yeah, look, my forecasts have held up quite well. I forecast the book was written in July of 2017, and I indicated that the ANC would likely lose Gauteng in 2024, and that it may emerge as it may go slightly below 50%, but will still be the dominant party and will rule until 2029. And I think that that forecast has held up quite well. What I thought would be the best for South Africa was a stable pro growth coalition between a reformed ANC and the Democratic Alliance. Now, of course, that is the only way in which South Africa after 2024 is likely to gain and retain a degree of stability. I don't think that one will have to see if the DA and the ANC are prepared to enter into that. But in between that, the 2024 elections and where we are now, there is most important event beyond the release of the Zondo Commission results will be, of course, the ANC's elective conference at the end of 2022. And depending on what happens there, you may find a splintering of the ANC, in which the rump of the party will stay with Ramaphosa, who I believe will not be unseated. I think he'll stay on as leader of the ANC and president of the country until 2029. But you may have a slight splintering of the party where a faction of the ANC hive off and maybe join forces with Julius Malema and the EFF. I don't think that's a governing alliance, but it certainly would mean that the ANC could significantly go below the 50%, but it will still be the majority party in South Africa, and will be able, in my view, to be able to put a governing alliance together until 2029.
So where does Action SA come into this picture? They only had a year. They got 16% of the Johannesburg vote and good slugs of Shwani and Ukuruleni. Is this not a force to be reckoned with?
Action SA is, but it's probably no more than a regional force in Gauteng for the time being. And the DA has also hit a ceiling. So I think that the prospects are for a much more regional division of power in South Africa, where you could find the DA, the Action SA put together a governing coalition together with the Freedom Front and a few others in Gauteng. In KZN, you may find a resurgent IFP take the lead there, depending on who they are prepared to enter into alliances with. And the Cape will stay, I think, solidly DA. Now, once the ANC loses Gauteng, in a sense, it's goose is cooked. And the central theme of my book, Fate of the Nation, was this division within the ANC between what I refer to as a reformist faction led by Ramaphosa and a traditionalist faction, which is, in a sense, where the EFF and the RET faction within the ANC could find themselves. But it will be a difficult road for all concerned. And the central challenge is that the ANC is losing its influence and power in all the important urban centra, KZN, around Durban and other areas in Gauteng and the Western Cape, of course. And on its current trajectory, Ramaphosa faces a challenge because he will be, in a sense, squeezed between losing the urban areas and the rural traditional areas where, in one sense, the RET faction support lies, and where, as I said, the EFF may enter into alliance with a faction within the ANC.
So, what does Ramaphosa do in this circumstance? He has been telling us, or observers have been telling us, that he's playing the long game. What's his long game?
Well, his long game is staying in power. He is at the moment, he's probably the last ANC president in South Africa. Also, in accordance with what I wrote about, 2029 will see the first chance that an opposition alliance could put together a governing coalition nationally, not before that. So the ANC will remain in power until then. And like almost in all Southern Africa, but almost in all African countries, we are slowly seeing the normalization of politics, where coalitions, messy coalitions, are coming to the front in South Africa, and where the country faces, it could be a difficult period, but we have a different constitutional dispensation, and the courts and civil society and the media have stood up and forced the ANC into holding it to account for the damage that it's done to South Africa over recent years.
You say messy coalitions. In history, is that what happens when you do go into an era of coalition politics? That nobody really knows how it's going to work out. You
Yeah,
have all kinds of bets. And in that context, I'd love to get your thoughts on something like the Patriotic Alliance, which has now gotten together, a small party put together by perhaps entrepreneurial politicians, gotten together with the ANC, backed what appears to be a losing horse, but it's given them disproportionate power in parts of the Cape. Similarly, with a faction, with a tiny party that has now got the deputy mayor of Durban, or eThekwini rather, with only 2 seats in
yeah,
2 proportional representative seats. That looks real messy to me.
it does. And it's the danger, are we going to learn through this process of coalitions, or is it going to remain unstable? And I think that the next few months are probably going to be unstable um, as the coalitions settle down and as parties shift, because there are no formal agreements that are behind the voting for mayors and speakers that have happened, and that is concerning. But I think that what has also happened is that the EFF, amongst others, have realized that its politics of sort of destructive politics have cost it at the ballot. With every election, the EFF runs into a ceiling of 10, 12% and hasn't been able to break out of it. Now, Malema's action plan is quite evident. He's trying to support the RET faction within the ANC so that that can splinter off and then join forces with the EFF and maybe push him a little bit higher. But it's as if South African voters don't believe that the EFF is a viable governing party at a national level. So the EFF is struggling. The problem that we face is that low growth, mediocre growth feeds into their storyline. And in the meanwhile, turning South Africa's growth trajectory around, which is slowly happening, is constrained by Eskom and by all the by the impact of the ANC's poor and corrupt governance, which we've seen for several years now. Well, under Jacob Zuma, things are turning around under Ramaphosa, but it's a slow and a long road.
Yaki, when you have a look at the results of the local elections, people are taking it very much on face value, and they don't seem to be bringing into account the fact that many ANC voters just stayed away.
Yeah.
They didn't vote for other parties. There was a net decline in the number of votes that were cast. Is this something that, in the long game, getting back to the leader of the ANC, the president of the country, that he'll be working towards to bring that vote out in 2024?
I think everybody is fighting for that exact vote, Alec. It can benefit the ANC, but if an alliance or individual opposition parties like ActionSA manage to mobilize that vote, they can grow very strongly. Maybe even the DA could do that, but there would have to be significant change within the leadership and the orientation of the party to achieve that. But that's what they're all fighting for. And at the moment, that stay away vote has huge potential to perhaps turn a party like Action SA into a truly national party. But then we would have to see action by Action SA. And I'm not sure that a party that grows that rapidly would be able to deliver. And it's also quite evident, Alec, I think that both the EFF and the DA have, in a sense, ganged up against the Action SA because they threaten both those parties, and effectively kept them out of too much influence.
So, how can the Democratic Alliance change to become, or to at least retain its position as the official opposition, and perhaps take control of the government at some point in time?
I think it'd be very difficult. The DA is hamstrung by, it tried with Musi Maimane and so on, but it's gone back. I don't say to its old ways, and it struggles. It really struggles in the media because it is beaten up as a white party of privilege, while of course it isn't really. It's more multiracial than most other parties, but it struggles. I think that the DA increasingly is a regional party, and we're all looking for new politics like Action SA to emerge that can attract the stay away vote. But make no mistake, the ANC is still the dominant party in South Africa. It will remain the dominant party out till 2029 and possibly even beyond that. That history, that legacy dies very, very slowly. So, will the ANC be able to put together governing coalitions? Or alternatively, will opposition parties have sufficient ideological coherence to put together a governing alliance? That's very difficult to see. All of that requires access to the stay away vote because that is what will determine. And as you indicated, South Africans are turning away from politics, and that is a cause of concern. But it will possibly be able to turn around if we can find new parties, Action SA and others come to the fore. But we can also see the resurgence of a party like the IFP. Of course, KwaZulu Natal is a little bit unique in terms of its racial and particularly its ethnic configuration, and the potential role even that the RET faction can play in that province.
You've mentioned a couple of times now about regional parties. In other words, the people in the Western Cape, they love the DA. The people in KwaZulu Natal increasingly love the IFP. Yet at a national level, both of those parties are hugely outvoted, and
Yeah.
not their philosophies, their ideals are not being taken into account in a centralist kind of state. How much credence do you give to the philosophy that South Africa will break up, that South Africa will become, in time to come, regions where those regional parties which represent people that are there, will actually force through the secessionist discussion, which was laughed at and now has been taken a little more seriously?
There's a global trend towards um, dissolution of countries, but I don't think it will happen in South Africa. The Western Cape is such an intrinsic part of South Africa that we may find that there is a fringe group that stand for this and that push for it. But turning that into something that will pass muster at a national level, I think is probably outside of the realm of politics in South Africa. The country would really have to disintegrate and really have to do badly. And I think when you look medium long term, we have mediocre prospects, but they could turn quite positively. It depends what happens with if the ANC is able to turn itself around. If the Zondo Commission and the reforms that Ramaphosa are slowly busy with gain traction, and there are many of them, but we've been hit by the one tragedy after the other, starting with Jacob Zuma, with COVID, and you name it. It is like just give us a break, guys. So I do think that the prospects are not as dire as many people think they are. We still live very, very well in South Africa, but we're all looking for that turnaround. I often make the point, Alec, I travel a lot, less at the moment, and I go to every country, to many countries in Africa and beyond. And every country makes the point that things are terrible. We are in the worst place in the world. And you come back to South Africa and you say, hey guys, it's actually not that bad. Many countries. We've done studies on Nigeria, Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, and we're finishing a number of others at the moment. And every one of those, they feel this is really terrible. I don't. I think we're struggling, but I think also that there are signs of green shoots if we can turn the economy around, and that's the critical thing in South Africa.
So let's look ahead to 2024. Herman Mashaba has said on interviews with Biz News that he's now going to be focusing his attention on building a national force. He is going to compete in every single by-election, he says, that it happens anywhere in the country. ActionSA will have a candidate over the next 2 to 3 years. And so that in 2024, he will become the president of South Africa. Now, those are bold statements, but he has positioned the party as a party for the poor, but with a route to success being through capitalism, through free enterprise.
Yeah.
Whereas the EFF is the party for the poor with the route to success through socialism. Those two do not make good bedfellows, yet they do seem, in the public perception anyway, to be allies in some sense.
I don't know. I think that Herman Mashaba and the DA have a tumultuous background, but that's where the DA, in a sense, is quite well positioned. That the dominant faction within the ANC, the Ramaphosa faction, and Herman Mashaba are closer ideologically to the DA than the EFF. I mean, the EFF's main target and its main source of potential support is the RET faction within the ANC. And that's where, but I don't think that Herman Mashaba is going to become president in 2024, nor Julius Malema. I think Herman Mashaba may have a chance of others of being part of a governing coalition in Gauteng, and I think that's quite likely. But it depends. It's this fight about the urban black vote, where that will go. Um, I think that the majority of that vote will not go to the EFF, because at the same time that the EFF and the DA are targeting Herman Mashaba, there is also an effort by the DA and Herman Mashaba to keep the EFF out. So it's politics. Nobody knows what's going to happen in these politics. But I think that come 2024, our president will be one Cyril Ramaphosa.
And your best guess looking forward to 2029, at which point, if the ANC's current trajectory continues, what might we be looking at then?
Then you have, for the first time in South Africa, the chance of an opposition alliance putting together a governing coalition. It will have to be a coalition. I don't think there's any chance that any single party will, apart from the ANC, will be able to govern South Africa. And well, the premise of this is you see a decline in the ANC, and that a variety of opposition parties then put together a governing coalition. A governing coalition that I think probably will exclude the EFF, because the ideological orientation of the other parties, the EFF, the DA, Freedom Front Plus, and possibly other new parties, is certainly much more center of the road than the sort of fascist policies, racist policies of the EFF. So I think there's a chance of that, but I wouldn't give it much more than 50-50, because the ANC as a dominant party would still be able to put together a coalition with the DA, or with possibly maybe ActionSA, that puts together a governing coalition of South Africa. It's not impossible.
Accepting that ActionSA says the one thing they will not do is go into coalition with the ANC. Getting just finally for 2024, nice and close to home, we've also got a new electoral act, which is going to change the way that South Africans' central government is put together. And the ANC continues to tell us that they've won most of the wards anyway in South Africa. Would this new electoral act, which will put more focus on who you elect locally in your constituency, would that not be in the ANC's favor?
It could be, of course. A variety of politicians, like Musi Maimane and so on, have tried to push this independent grouping. But I think eventually you need a party organization. You can't run a country on a loose coalition, a grouping of individuals with each his own agenda. Yes, if you are only interested in positions and money, as some of the parties are in South Africa, then maybe it can serve particular short-term benefits. But even in Kenya, which has really difficult politics and money politics and patronage politics, you find that people and personalities shift the whole time. But we are far away from the kind of politics in Kenya where personality drives literally everything. We still have parties with largely coherent political agendas. And I think for a party to become dominant in South Africa, to gain influence, it needs a coherent message and a platform. So I don't think the independents they reflect the disaffection that many South Africans have with politics.